Okay, so let's talk about your executive summary and the most common errors. Now, I know many of you want to get as good a grade as possible on a lot of assignments, so the executive summary is a good way to understand what business communication professors in particular are looking for and what a lot of your business school professors consider to be significant. All right. So business writing itself is purpose-driven, concise, and specific. So it is driven by a purpose, and it might be multiple purposes based on the different audiences. Your audience comes first. It needs to be concise. It needs to get to the point in most cases. Now, sometimes when there's bad news, you want to use a different tactic. So you'll usually use the direct method unless it's bad news, in which case you may use a more indirect method. And it's specific. It gives enough details for decision makers to make decisions. This is a time when you want someone to have what they need to do the work. So what is an executive summary? For a short report, it would be 1 page. And if you're writing a 5 to 10 page report, it's 1 page. Now, reports can range from 5 or 10 pages up to 200 pages. And so if you have a 50 to 100 page report, it's probably going to be a 2 or 3 or 4 page executive summary. But it is short. It is typically printed and attached to the cover of the report, or it is included as before the report begins. So in many PDFs, people are putting the executive summary first, and then you begin the report. It's intended for executives, so you always include the purpose, why you are doing this. Why? Because they want to know what what you spent their time and money on. You're paid by the hour. Often you're paid by a client. So what are you trying to do here? What do you include? All the sections of the report in order so that as they look through the executive summary, they can get a sense of what they want to look at closer when they first look at the report, because they're going to look at the report purposefully. What do you highlight? The most relevant arguments and data. So that means you will have data included in the executive summary, but it's the important data. So that decision about importance is a critical aspect of the executive summary. So who's an executive? Now, I looked online for pictures, and this is what I ended up with. It was really easy to find the picture of the male executive to the right. The female executive took a little longer, and wow, high heels. So we can kind of see cliches of what we're looking at here. But what I want you to come back to is that what drives executives, and really anybody who's going to be in a decision-making capacity most of the time, is why. Why are we doing this? Why should I care? Why should I make the decision you want me to make? So when someone first looks at this executive summary, they're going to ask the question, why should I care? So they're going to look at the title first. So titles matter. Please title everything. Name everything. Naming is important. And name things in a way that would matter to executives, not this is this assignment. So the executive is going to say, what is this? What is it summarizing? So if you say it's an executive summary, include the title of the report that you're summarizing. And who produced this? Who are you? Put your name on there. So if you set up your executive summary with the report name, and I have it in block quotations here, so you could actually put the exact report name and then executive summary, which is what it is, that's a typical thing, and then your name, then you've answered all the questions, and your executives would say, oh, okay, so that is answered for that person. All right, it's an executive summary of this report. Then they're going to look at that first part of the report. Now, it could be centered. It could say executive summary of, and then the report name, and then by your name. It could be centered again. But there's not going to be a lot of variance in this sort of thing, although sometimes it is created as a letter in a letter format to like an executive board. Now, I'm not making you do that because that gets even more weird with formatting and it's a little awkward. Just get 1 page. Getting everything down on 1 page shows me that you know how to distinguish what is important from what is not important. And then you would usually have the first part of your report, whatever it is called. If it's the introduction, great. If it's the background, great. Whatever comes first, you're going to use it as a heading so that someone can skim and find it. And note how the white space works here so that it's easy to see and skim and find things. So often when we have students, and here's a common error, when we have students who've written a lot of essays but haven't quite gotten the hang of it, you will have people who will reach back to the dawn of time to start everything. In the beginning, there was man and woman. I kid you not, I have seen something similar to this. They worked together and eventually developed writing. Obviously, that writing sometimes had errors, so mankind developed software applications to help writers better edit their writing. So there's this whole theory that comes first sometimes. Does your executive really care about that? Now, if it helps you get started writing, great. Wonderful. You can have it. Get to the point. This semester, UT Dallas decision makers have asked students to test 2 software applications in order to make a purchase. So you've finally gotten your writing up to speed. Please don't write on an empty page. It's intimidating and people don't do it. So if you write a lot of stuff that your executive won't care about, just delete it. Look at your section and ask, what would that executive care about? What is the purpose of this report? And since your audience is going to be these UT Dallas decision makers, that's where you want to start. So this semester, UT Dallas decision makers have asked students to test 2 software applications in order to make a purchase. Now that is in your report and it is the most important part right now. Now, here we get to the concise yet specific. Correct English and Grammarly in order to determine whether to purchase correct English licenses for students with a course fee. Well, what matters? We're addressing who those decision makers are and what the task is that they've given. We've addressed the applications that we're looking at. So now we're specific, which makes this better. And the course fee, that's playing a critical part in the decision making because students will be paying for this. So you're aware that students will have more of an opinion. It's not the university using a grant to buy this. Students are going to care. They are paying the bill. So this report includes a usability testing and surveys of current students. It closes with a purchase recommendation. All right, most of the time, previewing what comes next is a great idea. Do you have to? No. But if you're looking at anything and you're beginning, then saying what comes next and what's included is a good idea. Now, could you do this with bullets? Sure. There are other ways to do this. So we take that same paragraph and now we look at the next paragraph and see how these paragraphs are relatively short. Our first paragraph only has 6 lines. We want to stop at paragraphs that are 8 lines or less. And you want to make sure that you've clumped together in that paragraph things that are related. So don't start a new idea in a paragraph. Start a new paragraph and decide whether it's important enough. So make sure that you relate the purpose of the paragraph in every paragraph, particularly in an executive summary, and make sure that paragraph focuses on one major idea. And you use headings to attract the eye so that people don't even have to read the paragraph to have a pretty good idea of what it's going to hold in terms of what the focus is. So use those headings, please. So here are 2 headings. Our second heading is tests and surveys. So what is this paragraph about? Tests and surveys. So now it explains the way that the software applications were tested. They have students who inserted 3 assignments, then feedback, and then 4 students tested the interface, and then there was a survey. So we look at this paragraph, how can we improve that? Well, if we look at the paragraph itself, we see we're talking about 3 things that are 3 different testing methodologies. Well, 1, 2, 3. So now the same 3 UT Dallas business communication assignments were entered into both. Then a team of 4 students gathered to test the interface. Then there was a survey. All right, how do we make this better? So many of you ask, How can I go from good to better to best? Well, make it easier to skim and easier to remember, clump things. If you're going to use numbers or you're going to use bullets, then make sure that you at least have something very short, because a bullet is small. That's why we have bullets and we have numbers, so that people can immediately assess what it's about. So if you are talking about 3 things, we have assignment, feedback, interface testing, and survey satisfaction. So now we have added these 3 elements, and it's much easier to read and much easier to remember. It looks more professional too. Now we can take this, as you can tell from this change, and make it simpler. The same 3 writing assignments were entered in both applications, and the feedback evaluated and compared. 4 students tested the interface for 3 hours. 10 UT Dallas undergraduate students who used both software applications were surveyed. So this is better. Why is it better? Well, let's see. It is both concise and more specific. So I'm answering questions here. How extensive was the testing? Well, this gives the data on that, so that now it's easy. You know, it's sometimes people say, well, UT Dallas students tested it. Well, how many? How long did they take? In what context did they test it? Now we have those answers. So here's a common question students ask. Should I use bullets or numbers? Why do you use bullets? You want to draw attention to important information, and you want to organize efficiently for your audience. So what does that mean? Use bullets with white space. So please don't add bullets and decrease white space. Some of you are making your headings have no white space before them. That's a problem. You need to rethink how you're summarizing and what's important there. Make sure you have bullets that are short. Try to follow the 6x6 rule. And what that means is no more. The maximum number of bullets you ever have are 6. And then 6 bullets and then 6 words is the rule. Try not to have more than, try not to have, the most words you should have are 6 on bullets. Now, if you have more, do what I showed you. If you see no way to make things shorter, do what I showed you and at least have a word or phrase that's bolded for each bullet, so that it still meets the purpose of a bullet, so that somebody can glance down it and see something short to remember. I'm not, even though we show you sometimes paragraphs with bullets next to them, try not to just have a paragraph with a bullet. At least try to meet the fact that there's a word or phrase that you tie to that bullet, so that that's easy to read. Make your bullets parallel. That means they're in the same format. So if you have active verbs beginning 4 bullets, then the 5th bullet should begin with an active verb. Try to make them the same length. So, and then make them related. You should group like with like. So they should, one of these things is not like the other, means that it shouldn't be one of your bullets. So group things that go together. They should all be related. And then organizing efficiently, make sure that you have a heading before your bullets of some order, so that someone can glance at it, particularly in an executive summary, and see what all those bullets are related to. So if I see testing and surveys and then I see 3 bullets, I'm going to assume that those 3 bullets are the tests and the surveys, right? Put them in bite-sized pieces. So everything should be in bite-sized pieces, particularly in an executive summary, so it's easy to get the information. I'm an executive. I want this all cut up for me. Make sure it's concise. Go over it and over it, asking yourself, is this the best I could do? Now, all of this applies to your handout. So I'm going to look for headings. I'm going to look for bite-sized pieces. I'm going to look for it to be concise, and for the things that are important, just like on this particular slide, to be highlighted for me so I know why they're important. And then obviously I want it to be specific enough so that I can make decisions based on this. Now, you begin all items with the same part of speech. When I talked about parallelism, that's what this means. Draw and organize are both active verbs. Both of these bullets begin with the active verbs. So that's a rule that you should remember for both bullets and numbers. Keep all items about the same length. So sometimes I'll see bullets and I'll see them of varying lengths. It is a best practice to try to keep them the same length. So if you have one bullet that's 3 lines long and all your other bullets are 1 line, there's a problem. Note how these are approximately the same length. They're not exactly the same length, but they're approximate. They're both 1 line. They have similar numbers of words. So you want to create consistency and uniformity because for your audience, that's something that's important. They are working corporate jobs. They want to know what to expect, and these are the expectations in those workplaces. That's how these people function. They make their money. They're not looking for huge surprises. They want something that fits with what they expect to see typically. So think about branding and who your audience is and what you want them to see and expect. So if you're going into the tech sector, you want to start looking at people in the tech sector and technology sector and how they write, the word choices that they use, how they organize their work, what they care about. This is part of being in college and part of that part of that experience. So read and think and ask questions about those workplaces. Don't expect them to teach you everything and tell you how, tell you the secret rules. You're going to have to figure out a lot of that yourself. And your boss is going to ask, is this professional? Is this useful, concise, and polished? So your boss is going to, I hate to say this, but your boss is going to evaluate you. So your boss is going to ask, are you professional? Are you useful, concise, and polished? Based on what you give that person. So if you give them a mess, they're going to think you are a mess. So get in the habit of having work that has gone through multiple edits, that is attractive, that is organized, that is easy to act upon and send to clients, because that is the very best thing you can do. Run it through 7 people before it hits your boss, and then ask your boss for feedback and make the changes the boss recommends. You want to be the person who gets to interact with clients. Some, new hires are never allowed to talk to clients. The faster you can get to the point where you can represent your firm and talk to clients because you send professional materials and you send professional emails, the faster you're going to move up the ladder. So why use bullets? You're drawing attention to that important information and you're organizing efficiently for your audience. But remember that consistency is important. So you're going to end all your items the same. So if you have complete sentences, then all your bullets need to be complete sentences with that period at the end, right? So look them over. When I look at your resumes, that's one of the things that I see that's inconsistent. When I look at handouts, that's one of the things that I see that's inconsistent. So rule number 1, use bullets if all items in a list are equal. So when you're asking the question, bullets or numbers, ask, are these things all equal? Use numbers when you want to show chronology, which is sequence. This happened and then this happened and this happened, or do this first and then this and then this, or priority. What's our first what's the most important thing we're going to accomplish here? What's the second most important? What did I discover? First, I discovered this. Rule number 2, use numbers to show sequence or importance, as I've just talked about. So there's that difference between bullets and numbers. Ask yourself which one matters, and then use numbers to refer to specific points quickly. So if you remember the 6x6 rule for bullets, so if you are going to have 20 items in a list, you probably don't want bullets. You probably want numbers. Why? Because then you can say, look at numbers 17 through 20. These are all blah, blah, blah. That way you can have a meeting and talk about specific bullets or issues quickly. So that's another time you use numbers. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to this rule. Eliminate repetition when bullets all begin the same way, because this is a big issue I see with students, and it's a difference between a C or a B and an A. So if I have these bullets, what do you see that's the repetition, the same here? The software. Every bullet is beginning the same. So if you remove that and you simplify, suddenly the bullet becomes easier to read. Now, even better, if you ask yourself what's the most important aspect here, now we're getting down to bullets that I can quickly glance at. One of these things is not like the others, right? Which one? Here we have an active verb while everything else is a noun. Colors, button, recommendations, all nouns. Resembles Microsoft Word, active verb. Now, I can look at this grouping and say, okay, these are things that students disliked. So a better way to begin this set of bullets is with the heading of maybe disliked under the heading for correct English, liked and disliked. And maybe I will do a comparison in a table format on liked and disliked for my two different software applications. Now, I still have to deal with this active verb situation. So what do I do? I'm just going to take this out because it can go in my liked section. And now I just have 3 nouns. And that's easier to work with. And I know that when I do the comparison, so if this is about correct English, then if I do the comparison on disliked for Grammarly, I'm going to want to use nouns as well. And I'll probably put them in a table format with disliked and then bullets on one side and bullets on the other. Okay, so if we're looking, going back to the very beginning, if we're looking at an executive summary, make sure that any document, including your handout, will have some sort of title on it. Now, if you are writing an email, it's your salutation, dear so-and-so, because your audience is most important. So you don't have to have a title. You're going to have dear so-and-so. But you have to have that dear so-and-so, dear professor. Dear Professor McCready is fine for your email number 3. Now, we're looking at, we're skimming this for information. Here we have our introduction, and we're looking further. Here we have our tests and surveys, and here's the better version of the tests and surveys. And now we turn it into bullets because these are all ways that we tested. So maybe I decide I don't want to do 1, 2, 3 with the assignment feedback most important. You know, or it doesn't matter the chronology. So now we're going to add results. And for results, we're going to summarize. This is in the report. Here's an overview. So maybe I have a simplified version of the table, and I have the feedback. And then since I previously had tests and surveys with this as my second aspect, I'm going to mirror that in the results section and do student interface testing. So I move this up, and here I explain, here's what they did, and now I have a little table. Here's a comparison chart. So, yay, it's really easy to glance at. And now I mirror in my results section the same aspect that I had in my tests and survey section. So I've gone back to the tests and survey section, and now I have this final section. Who would use this again? Well, 80% would use this. Now, what is missing? I don't have the why. So I don't have why this is important. You need to have that. So the executive summary is not supposed to be this mystery that you pose to try to intrigue people to read the report. So please include the most important things. Please don't hide them and go, to understand why I would, understand the true value or what recommendation I have, please read the report. No, you're going to give them all the information, and you're going to explain the analysis is important. Now, a simplified version is fine, but you want to have the critical details. So if 80% would use again, and only 1 out of 10 thought that they would use it again or it improved their grades, and 60%, 6 out of 10 thought it improved their grades to use Grammarly and that they would use it again, and it had name recognition, these numbers are important. So you would talk about them in a significant section, and you would go back, and for every section you would have a significant section. So for every testing. So here are 2 different sections, easy to read, and you would go back and make sure that significance was addressed. So once again, we get to the importance of this. Your audience, an executive, is going to wonder, are you a professional? Are you useful, concise, and polished? what are you doing here? And they're going to ask the critical question, why? Why am I reading this? Why should I care? Why are these numbers important? You should always have an answer. Why is the number important? So when I'm looking at the why, I look at your document, such as a handout, and I ask, does this have a purpose? What's the purpose of this? And then what's the appearance? Is this consistent? Is there uniformity? And then what about the organization? Do I see headings, bullets, or numbers, and spacing, and do those follow the rules? And do they, are they important? Do they meet the purpose? So I'm going to cycle back. Then integrity. Are you somebody I'd want to have working for me? Do you have a methodology that you apply? So what do you do and why do you do it? And are you consistent in how you do it? Are you relevant? If you talk about a lot of things just to impress me, but they aren't important, then you're irrelevant. And your why is there's no purpose to you. There's no purpose to this document. Usefulness. So once again, relevance is tied to usefulness. Do you ask important questions? Do you answer important questions? Do you spot trends? Is this professional? Is this something I could show other people? So I look for polished work and industry typical work. So if you're producing, if you want to be an IT professional and you're producing a handout, then you want to look at how handouts in your industry would look. What are typical branding moves in the industry? If you want to go work at Google, then you're going to use a lot of white space and you're going to look at how they set up their documents and the types of questions that they ask. So think about these things. Now, students often ask me, what does relevance mean? And that basically means, is it connected to your overall purpose? Is it important? Do you get to the point? So that's the direct method, and in most cases, you're going to use that in the United States. So it all comes back to purpose. Relevance is related to purpose. Why? Why am I doing this? Why should I care? When you look at appearance, remember, appearance matters, just like when you go for an interview. The way things look matter. Now think about your responses to Correct English and Grammarly. Your response is based on, in many cases, the appearance of that interface, right? That matters to you. So you look for particular things in particular spots because you're accustomed to that. So you want to give that to your audience. When we look at organization, ask yourself, go through your document and ask yourself, is this organized thoughtfully and consistently? Can people get the main ideas in bite-sized chunks? Do I highlight what is important? Even if it's good, it often could be a little better. So what is methodology? That's a question students come back to, and I have addressed it. I want you to ask yourself, is this valid and reliable, though, to answer your methodology question? So if you want to know if a toothpaste tastes good, and you say 4 out of 5 people prefer Crest toothpaste, and I ask you how you know that, and you said, well, I asked 5 people, that's neither valid nor reliable, because I can't know if those 5 people are representative of all the people I want to sell toothpaste to. So when you ask yourself, is this valid and reliable, be specific and be clear about how broad this is, whether you think that this is reliable or not, whether you think it's a good point. So, that's the question I'm asking about you. That's the question I'm asking about this, your work, and that's the question an executive would ask you. Many students wonder, when you say spot trends, what are trends? What does that mean? It's not like fashion. Everybody's wearing cropped jeans or something. In this case, in the case of these software applications, what will student users experience in the future? So what is it going to be like for them to use this software? Now, you could say my case is valid and reliable because when I use this software, here is literally what I found. Other student users are going to enter similar work because these are typical assignments and they're going to get typical results. Did you find enough to make this a good argument? Saying Grammarly worked well is not a good evaluation or summary or anything. I know it's a sentence, and I like it because it's short, but it doesn't answer the questions. This is better. It was easy to understand. So you're a typical student. You understood what to do. Why? So remember, I kept having why in green writing. Why? The interface was intuitive. Okay, so what does that mean? The interface is what I see when I look at the screen, so I'm using an industry-specific word. And intuitive means that people automatically understand what to do and can use it. So an intuitive interface would mimic something that students are accustomed to, would be obvious, would have white space directing them to the things that are important, would maybe do some things automatically. So intuitive is another word that's typical in tech. They want interfaces and applications that are intuitive so that they don't have to teach you how to use it, because the minute you start teaching someone how to use something, it's often because they've become frustrated first. So you want to build teaching into their experience. So when I get to the recommendation part of that one page, one of the things I'm looking for in that final statement, and this is something that is important all the time, is, again, get back to your audience's goals. Why are they looking at this paper? Why are they looking at whatever you've given them? And in this case, your purchase committee, they're executives at UT Dallas, and they are trying to improve student writing in the writing process. They're wanting to alert students to common errors so that those students can improve and get better and know where their issues are. And they want something that will be perceived positively by students because students are paying for it. So these goals should be addressed to some extent in the recommendation itself. So why would you recommend or not recommend? Well, it met or did not meet certain goals.